This is Karen White again with Channing Ayers, and we are going to just talk about the sign of Capricorn because there's so much going on in the sign of Capricorn right now. We have the Sun, Jupiter, and the South Node, and Saturn, and Pluto, all in the sign of Capricorn. So Channing has something really interesting that she noticed I'd like her to talk about. So go ahead, Jenny.
Well, this goes back to kind of the basic description of Capricorn from the Jaimini perspective. So we just did the video on Parashara, which has so much information in it. It's so interesting. But when you look at it from the Jaimini perspective too, Jaimini talks about if you break up the sutra, there's several things going on in there, and one of them has to do with things from the air, right? So there's aquatic animals, things moving in the air, planets, birds, demons, villages, kapha, itches, defects, guilt, and tumors, joints. So that's in Capricorn. That's Ernst's translation of the sutra in Jaimini. So, I mean, one of the things that's been really interesting is I've noticed, and I don't know statistically what's happening, but I started trying to look it up a little bit, but there's been a huge amount of things going on with airplanes, air traffic, and the defects in the Boeings. So Boeing is under scrutiny right now because there's been several Boeing 737s that have malfunctioned and caused crashes. And the amount of people dying from plane deaths jumped up something like 900% from last year.
That's amazing.
Or from 2017. So 2018 is what the statistics are out about, and then 2019 I'm not sure yet. But just in 2018 alone, there was a huge amount of deaths from a lot of different incidences of large aircrafts. And I think that this might be connected with the Saturn moving into the sign of Capricorn, Ketu moving into the sign of Capricorn, Pluto being in the sign of Capricorn, Saturn and Pluto are coming closer together. I just think it's really fascinating that this may have an impact on traveling through the air. You know, I don't watch the news a lot, but my father watches the news, and I'm hearing all these stories going on about planes crashing into houses. And I heard one night, and then there was a different plane that happened. And I just have been paying attention to this, kind of like, oh, is this connected with these planets going through Capricorn? So there's a possibility of that.
Yeah, just a possibility. So we're not trying to scare you off air travel. just realize that this is just a possibility.
And I think it's bringing up all these questions with Boeing.
Yeah.
It's actually leading us to being safer in the air.
Yes.
It's just more consciousness around these things.
So Capricorn also being concerned with preventing problems in the future. This will lead to more. Yeah. That's what we're trying to say here. Okay.
We're not trying to scare anyone from going in the air. There definitely has been more up with things in the air in a lot of ways. So I think that's just because we've had some, the big players in that sign.
Yeah, and it's Saturn ruled, so, it's going to tend to be more along those kinds of lines, where it's not all, rainbows and unicorns and that kind of thing. Which reminds me, you had also mentioned to me earlier today that the last time that there was this combination of Pluto, Saturn, and Ketu, I believe it was?
And Jupiter.
And Jupiter.
Jupiter just entered into the sign of Capricorn. In later November. So we have the big players in there. Saturn takes 2.5 years through a sign, Jupiter takes a year through a sign, and the nodes take 1.5 years going through the sign. And then Pluto is anywhere from, the Pluto changes its course. It's not even through all of the signs, but Pluto's been in there for quite some time, since 2008.
Yeah, quite a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's been going over my ascendant, and I've changed. I mean, so much has happened in my life. It's been a complete revolution, which is
Yeah.
what happens when you have Pluto going through the ascendant. Your life completely changes in some way, but it happens slowly over time.
It does.
And also, one of the things I wanted to mention too is because Jupiter is going over the ascendant for Capricorn rising people, this is the time that you get your debts paid off. And you know what? It's like without even consciously realizing it, I found myself checking out books from the library on money, like ways to pay off debts and accumulate money, security-based things. And this is
Very
something that I'm
practical.
normally not that interested in, right? But I started doing it.
Yeah.
What about you? Have you had anything like that happening for you because your ascendant sign is in Capricorn? Your ascendant.
Well, I mean, I have just felt a trajectory of maturity happening in my life through all these years. So I'm always trying to get a little more on top of things, a little more practical, a little more efficient, and trying to see all those ways that, maybe I can do something about, and looking at very practically at what I can't do something about. So it's really been putting more and more energy into what I am able to put my efforts towards. And so there's the practicality of that. But yeah, we haven't had these planets all in this sign since 549.
And what happened then?
Well, that year specifically was given to the actual fall of Rome. So the Roman Empire, that took many centuries. It wasn't just, Rome didn't fall in one day, but that was the year where it all came to a crashing end specifically. And that is the year that historians assigned to the end of the classical age or the age of antiquity, and we moved into the Middle Ages. So there's a consciousness shift that happened during that time frame. That inevitably human civilization had to go through these larger periods of time, these consciousness shifts. We don't know what this consciousness shift is going to be because we're in it. We're not going to be able to understand the significance of this particular transit through these signs probably for many generations. And we'll look back on this time frame and we'll see this probably. My hunch is that it'll be the shifting of an age. So an era of consciousness kind of comes into play at this point.
Would you be willing to speculate as to what you think it could be referring to?
Well, we know that Capricorn is associated with the 10th sign of the zodiac. So there is an aspect to this that's connected with our government, our rules, our traditions. So I think we're seeing a lot of shifting in this in general across the globe. I know here in the US there's a lot going on as well. But I also see it as a bigger shift maybe into what our responsibility is on a material plane. So the earth and the environment and our responsibility towards taking care of the environment, I think is coming up pretty rapidly in our consciousness, more so every year as the weather patterns shift, and we're really questioning what is our responsibility, how are we interacting with our planet, and what do we need to do from here on out? What are the places where we're going to have to show up and put effort into in order to take care of our responsibility?
And what's very interesting about that is that Saturn's job in the body is to clean. He cleans up. He's part of the immune system. He gets rid of the pathogens and all that kind of stuff. And in this chart of the United States, isn't Capricorn on the descendant, which represents the people?
Yeah, I've looked at two different versions of the chart of the United States, but there are definitely some heavier connections with the United States. And this transit itself, it has Pluto and Saturn and then Ketu. So, Jupiter's there too, being ruled by Saturn. All these planets are being ruled by Saturn, but Ketu is having to do with karmic, completions.
Mm.
So there's a cycle that I think is happening, that it completes it's coming to an end, and we're getting ready to begin a new cycle, which is exciting.
Yeah. And
you
so
know,
the people born during this conjunction too, they're probably going to have a great deal to do with this changing.
sure.
And really, like, there are a lot of people now who are, becoming more and more aware of these issues with the earth.
Yeah.
And they're starting to do things about it. But
Yeah.
probably that generation is going to be the one who's really going to make the biggest changes. What do you think?
Well, yeah. I mean, I see each generation coming in with a different theme, and so here we go with Pluto being in the theme of Capricorn. There's an element of Pluto. We don't talk about Pluto too much in Vedic astrology, but it's still just as important. And Pluto has its connection with Capricorn as well, with the Shiva aspect to it, the destroyer aspect to it, and the element of destroying the ego, or destroying the things that no longer need to be there, that are so I'm imagining that this generation that's coming in is going to have a very strong capacity to cut through things that no longer are are there for our survival. It's we're going to have to really focus on our survival. And what's important here, because Capricorn, ruled by Saturn, is a survival based planet. So I think
that's Saturn's job in our chart, is to help us to survive, because it's not easy here on Earth.
Yeah. And it's so funny watching what's going on with government. I mean, here in the U.S. and with Brexit, and probably with a lot of other places, there's so much topsy-turvy, and there's so much up in the air. We really don't know what's going on. There's a lot of things being exposed. There's a lot of light being shed on things that just aren't working anymore. So I'm wondering how, in the United States, watching this impeachment process and whatnot, I'm wondering how this is going to impact our Constitution. I wonder how this is going to impact our democracy, how we've traditionally held on to our vision of democracy and the right to vote and equality and freedom of speech and the right to bear arms and all of these things, and how this is going to somehow either be upheld, or modified, because we've got all these plans that's transiting through here. So the government itself is shifting.
Right. And Saturn is one of the planets of maturity. So perhaps maybe we'll become more mature in these things, and maybe not quite as idealistic as we were.
Exactly.
But more mature, which doesn't, you see, I'm like really, well, Capricorn is able to see down the line and see what kind of problems can develop before they even develop.
Exactly.
So perhaps what you're saying is that Capricorn function, seeing that maybe there might be a threat to democracy. I tend to not want to even believe that. So I don't know. I guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens.
Well, I think it's really interesting, because a lot of the conversations that have come up around the Constitution are, what was democracy founded on? What was the Constitution founded on? Trying to foresee the problems in the future and trying to put in articles that would help address any problems that came up in the future. And here we are at this junction where we're facing something that hasn't ever happened before. We're working with a lot of interpretation of these foundational elements, qualities of our democracy, and a lot of things are getting challenged and questioned in new ways. So there's this aspect to it that's saying, oh, is this a problem that we need to prepare for in the future? Is this something that we can restructure in a way that's going to help us get through the next few hundred years, or however long the next age lasts? I just think it's fascinating to watch. There's not even a judgment one way or another. It's not like, this is so bad and this is so good and this is terrible. It's more of going, wow, these things that are actually happening are directly related to the nature of this sign and these planets that are going through here. So everything that's coming up is a consequence of these combinations of these planets here, and it's intrinsically connected with our human evolution process, on a big
Yeah.
level. Who knows if there's a plan, if it's going in a certain direction because of, like, I'm not trying to even attach
Yeah.
meaning like that to it. It's
Hmm.
just fascinating to watch it in the purity of understanding the nature of Capricorn and how this all is sort of coming to the surface.
Yeah, it's very fascinating. It's one of the great things about astrology is that it can give you that bird's eye view and the objectivity
Mm-hmm.
also
Mm-hmm.
to see what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
So let me see. Is there anything else? Well, you know what? There's one more thing about Capricorn, actually, and that is it's about getting to the root of a problem. So it's not just preparing for a rainy day and preparing for things that can go wrong, but in order to truly do that, you have to get to the root of the problem. And if you have important planets in the sign of Capricorn, like say you have your Atmakarika in the sign of Capricorn in your Navamsha chart, which I hope wasn't a bunch of astrobabble, you don't know what I'm talking about, but it's very important. The ninth divisional chart in Vedic astrology called the Navamsha is super important. And the Atmakarika, the self-essence planet or the self-producer planet, if it's in the sign of Capricorn in that chart, it has to do basically with your spiritual challenge this lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
And that is to get to the root level
Mm-hmm.
of whatever problems you have in your life. And in that chart in particular, it has to do with your path, it's marriage as well. Do you want to say something about that too, Channing?
Well, gosh, we could talk about so many things about Capricorn.
I
Like
know.
there's one more thing, and there's one more thing. But I mean, the symbolism of Capricorn, just it being like you were saying, getting to the root of the problem, was reading about the difference between Cancer and Capricorn, right? So
Mm,
Cancer, we have on the other side, the exact opposite, and Cancer is this a crab who is in the water all the time and sometimes comes out of the water, but mainly is staying in the water. And then on the other side, we've got the crocodile, which is now not always in the water, that spends a lot of time on the ground and on the land, and then goes back into the water to try and find its food or find its nourishment. So there's an aspect to this that's, you were talking about the spiritual growth and the spiritual development. There's an aspect of Cancer being the emergence of the material from the spiritual, right? So there's
mm-hmm.
emerging out of the water. And then Capricorn is going back into the water. So there's an aspect of the materialism that's already manifested, the concrete reality, the root, right? The actual what is there, and going down into the water to now contemplate that, to now
Mm.
find the spiritual in the physical reality. And these are such important signs in the natural zodiac. We have these as the cardinal signs, the points, the angles. We have, Aries and Libra on one end, and then we have Cancer and Capricorn on another end. This is the cross of manifestation. This is what, this is the sacrifice of the spiritual nature into physical form, and then the release of the physical form back into the spiritual nature is the cycle of the mystery of life on such a deep level. So that's the complexity to the sign is so powerful. It's just such an interesting sign.
Yeah. So one of the ways that maybe we can help to make it more accessible to people in their own life and their own birth chart, um, you can get your birth chart and see where Capricorn is in there. And there's places all over the internet where you can find out the basic meaning of the houses. And you just find out what house it's in. And so that's a house that is being developed and revolutionized and changed. And at the end of it, Jaimini says that there's a gain that comes from this contemplation. and that has to do with pearls, shells, and edibles from the sea. And it symbolizes the pearl of great price, which is the potential for mental peace and happiness that comes from looking inward and the resulting fulfillment. So I just wanted to bring that up. Do you have any last words you want to say about Capricorn, or some advice?
Well, the advice that has helped me a lot is understanding that Capricorn is that main theme in our spiritual journey, is that we cannot be attached to the outcome, right? There's never, like, so you were talking about the great spiritual gain, the pearls, the wisdom, the connection of Capricorn with this the success of our efforts, but we can't ever be attached to that. We can't ever be attached to the outcome, and that's what makes Capricorn a very karmic sign. That there's, and the aspect that we were talking about with the powerful jaws of the crocodile, that that is a force of nature that no one can actually overcome except for divinity, and that we're really working with just only being able to put our own efforts in as best we can. And so when I think of Capricorn, I think there's an aspect in there of that knowledge and awareness can really help let go of the guilt or any shoulds or any sort of heavier feelings that were attached, that were responsible for the outcome of things on some level, and really to just put your best effort in and to enjoy that effort as much as possible.
Yeah.
The karma yogi.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Channing. This has been great. Thank you for doing this with me. Again, this is Channing Ayers from ChanningAyersAstrology.com, and I'm Karen White of DivineTimeAstrology.com, and we will see you next month for Aquarius.